What is it? I can be the express. This is one. Does everybody have these two shapes here? Can you also look at
What do you need, Joe?
$1 million? No. It's 23 minutes. Trust it. Oh, wait, where are you going? You still going? I'm still having to do that. Your phone. I saw that. That's nasty. That's it. No, that's the purchase. Yeah. Purchase. Sorry, guys, about the delay. That was a wonderful day to start the new printer system for us. And the good news is you all have to start using the new printer and set it up. Should have print some more. So what I just distributed out to you guys is the proof of funds, MLS. So what you guys should have, there is a pre-approval that you need for your client whenever you want to write an offer, right? You should have the MLS printout. This is the MLS printout. The agent version of it. Does everyone have one? I will give it to you. In case you have double, please let me know. So that's, so yeah, pre-approval, and then you should have the title that we all have the title. Please confirm. Huh? It should be on the back side.
Oh, on this?
It could be, it's a double-sided, so I know you have, if you have one of these, and then this is the back side of it. Okay, I will give it, this is for you, and I have a few more. You should also have the purchase contract. Does everyone have a purchase contract? Okay, she's printing, some more, it will be done. So I'm assuming if you have reached the point that you want to sit down and write an offer, the reason I give you all that is just that before you sit down and you want to write an offer, you need every single one of those. And as I go through the purchase contract, you will understand why you need to do all that. And I'm assuming that even before that, some of you are brand new, probably you had a discussion with your client about what the price should be. Probably you had a discussion with the lender. What's the minimum contingency period that needs to be done on the purchase contract? So prior to sitting down and writing the offer, probably you had a conversation with the buyer to, what are the terms, what are the prices? Probably you gone on MLS, pull some comps and what have you. You had a conversation with the lender. So then when you have all of these in front of you, now you are ready to write an offer. I printed out the title. Why? Sometimes the way I like to do, I want to know who this seller is. I want to know if the square footage that's on the title matching what's on the MLS. Make sense? So before I start writing an offer, and sometimes if I'm even want to get a sense to see what's going on with the property. Is this a property that was somebody purchased a year ago and they're selling it right now? Is it a flip? Somebody maybe bought it 3 months ago, just remodeled the kitchen and bring it back on the market. What was their cost? So it gives me a better sense of where the seller or the agent coming from. So that's why I pull the title, I look at the title, see who the seller is, how much was it bought, how long ago they had. If it's somebody that's been there for 30 years, it's paid off. Or I can see the loan amount that it was purchased 3 years ago, and still they have a $900,000 loan on it. So when you want to make an offer of $1 million, probably the seller is in the negatives. So that's why it's very easy. When you're on MLS, all you have to do to go to the title is usually when you go to MLS, you pull a property, you see this page, right? All you do to go to the title part of it, you go to the address. When you click on the address on the top, automatically takes you to the title. And then you can see whatever is there. And I don't want to spend the whole time going back and forth. This is something that you can do on your own time. All right. What I'm gonna do, I'm gonna start with let's see if she can take you purchase contract. Okay. Who does not have the purchase contract? And you? Anybody else missing the purchase contract? And you? You need it, I don't know. All right. All right, so. All right, so let me now from here, now we're gonna go
Can
in.
you start from the beginning? So look at late.
Well, truly,
Okay.
so now you go to documents. You're gonna look for RPA, Residential Purchase Agreement. California Residential Purchase Agreement. You click on that. Okay, you're gonna come back. You pick on that, it shows now you are in the purchase contract. When you search RPA, Residential Purchase Agreement.
Did you act document?
That's.
They're all stapled.
Right. Is there anybody that's missing any of the documents before we go on? Does everybody has to pre-approval all the other items?
I don't have the list.
Unless you don't have the items. You get a color, is it?
Thank you.
All right. So, in the old days, we used to have a, you know what, let's, a bit, okay. So, in the past, we had, you know what, we used to have the purchase contract, you know how now you have, whenever you press on the, RPA, you get little other disclosures attached to it. In the past, we had to do it manually, and a lot of agents would forget. So they say, you know what, let's make this in a situation that agents don't skip this. The first one is agency disclosure. The importance of that, if you don't submit this with your purchase contract, you don't get paid. Basically, seller can refuse paying you commission. Is that good enough of a reason for you to include the in every single purchase contract? Okay, so especially, you know, even it's worse when you're the listing agent. With no question, seller can wait till escrow is closes, and the seller says, Mr. Listing Agent, I'm not paying you. The selling agent provided one of these, but you never provided me this. And without it, even you cannot sue them. Flat out, seller can refuse paying the listing side commission, and there's nothing that the listing agent can do. Is that good enough of a reason for you to make sure that you, before you start working with the seller, to have a sign a agency disclosure?
Yeah.
Now you understand why this is the first page. They try to protect you and put this on the first page of it. Make sense? All right. So basically what the agency is, it's, you know, because a lot of times you go to start writing a contract and this buyer or the seller says, what am I signing? Is this item that from now on, every single property I'm gonna purchase, I'm gonna go through you, like a BIE? That's not the case. This is just an item that it's just an item that we want to make sure that the buyer or the seller understands that they are dealing with Keller Williams, that Keller Williams, and you as a representative of Keller Williams, they're going into business with you. Make sense? So always remember, you are not the agent. Keller Williams is the company. So when you go in, and a lot of times you see what, in the old days on the purchase contract, your name would be on the last page. And then recently they had your name on the front, but the first time you saw your name anywhere was the last page. On the listing contract, you don't see your name on the first page, you see your name on the last page. You see Keller Williams on the first page, but you don't see your name. On the purchase contract, they revised, and now you see the agency at the beginning, but in old days, it was not there. And why? Because when you get a listing, it's Keller Williams listing, not yours, because they are the broker, and you are the agent for Keller Williams. Makes sense so far? So you understand how the system works. So as you deal with the buyer and the seller, you check mark. You put the name of the buyer and the seller here. You have to put here, you're gonna put the company's BRE number. And if you don't know it by heart, which is 20259. Our brokerage is 02089059. You have to know that, save it. My recommendation is create a template. Create a template, and then put all of these in the template. So every time you're writing an offer, you don't have to scroll through all your emails, all your paperwork, looking to see what's the PR number for the office. Also, if you create a template and you put your name, all that in there, every time you're writing an offer, you're gonna save you time automatically there.
What, did you mark off the X at the beginning too?
I'm sorry. All right. Oh, I apologize. You see the X here?
Yeah.
This is only used when you're doing the lease contract. So if you have a lease contract, that's the only time you check mark that. So for when you're doing the leases. Because this form, it's not only used with the purchase contract, at this moment, it's attached to a purchase contract, but it also can be used, the same form can be used for when you're presenting a tenant. Make sense?
Yeah.
All right, so if it was a lease contract that you were doing, that's, you're presenting a tenant, you would be checking this.
So can you scroll down to the number again, the RE number?
And then did you put your license number? too?
Yeah, so my license number would be whatever you guys do your own. So that's my BRE number, your name. And when you go for signature, the date and all that would come. So if in case you're wondering why there's nothing there, because it has to be, when you're signing this on the left, then automatically the date would populate to at the time of the, when you're sending it for signature.
I have a question.
Yes.
If you're working with a buyer and you want to do a purchase contract, and you say, oh, I want some time to think about it. Can you date it to a future date?
What do you mean?
And then, is the contract invalid until that date is reached if you post-date it, or is it?
On what form? This form?
Yeah.
Yes. We can date this.
But if you send it
There's no
early.
reason. This has to be done prior of a purchase contract or a listing contract.
Got it.
As a matter of fact, going to the listing contract, let's say you're going out for a listing, appointment, right? You go in there, you take your listing contract, and you forget to take that. You come back the next day and say, oh, I forgot to have you sign this. Too late. Too late. If this gets signed the next day of when the seller signed the listing contract, still, you already can refuse paying your commission. So when you tell me post-dated,
Yes.
makes sense? These are knickknacks that, most people they don't know, but the reason I'm telling you this, I'm telling you why is it important and why they went through the trouble putting it the first disclosure part of the tax, so you would know why they're including it. Practically, they're trying to save you. All right, there's nothing you can do you have to do on the page. The next disclosure is fair housing and dispersion advisory. Again, on this general disclosure, and I don't want to take your time. We have limited time, even though that we are here for 2.5 hours. I'm assuming there's going to be plenty of questions. You have to make sure that both the buyer and seller sign.
On this page, on page 2.
Yeah. Next one is PRBS, possible representation of more than one buyer or seller. So, as far as I know, our broker for this office and Calabasas is the same broker. Rich, right? Is a broker. So anytime we are representing any property that anybody in this office and anybody in the Keller Williams Calabasas representing a client, when we go into a contract that one office is representing the seller, one office representing the buyer, it would be a dual agency. It's like we are in the same office because we share the same broker. Make sense?
Yeah.
So that's one. The second instance is that, listen, you've been working with 10 buyers. Your job is to work with buyers. A property hits the market, and all of a sudden you have two separate buyers that they're interested in the same property. And you're writing offer for two buyers on the same property. You have to disclose to the buyer, listen, there is a possibility that I'm working with it. I'm representing, because most often when you think of dual agency, you're thinking that you're representing both the buyer and the seller. Well, it could be that you are also representing two buyers on the purchase of the same property. You're writing an offer, you have two buyers that are looking for a house in Westwood, whatever, and for the same exact property. So you know what, we might write offer on for both of them on the same property. That makes sense? So that's why that would be to protect you. So in case you do that, you're protected. Sometimes you may or may not know that the listing, you're not paying attention that the listing is from Calabasas. You know, and you may not know that they're the sister company. Just for you to know. Make sense so far? And then again, you're gonna populate, you know, right now for, you know, when I did the MLS Connect, since I'm the listing agent on that property, it populated my name. And since I'm gonna be the selling agent, it populated my name. But it could be different. So in this case, probably you guys gonna be the selling agent. All right. Next, wire fraud. Wire fraud, basically, we had so many instances of fraud, whereas hackers intercepted an email that was going from an escrow company to the seller or to the buyer, and changing just a routing number or an account number to, you know, to make it so the funds would go into their account. And there are little stories that you may or may not heard, but a lot of times, you know, they would get an email, for example, it would say the name of ABC, you know, escrow company. It looks exactly like the escrow company you're working with. But when you really look at if you look at truly the email address, then you see the email address might have a ABCD escrow company. So they tweak the email address just a little bit, so you cannot even tell. And it has happened so many times. So my suggestion, your suggestion to your client is, listen, buyer, when you go to the bank to do the wire, call escrow company. Say, listen, call the escrow company and say, escrow officer, right now I'm standing in the bank. I'm trying to make it a wire. I want to make sure that I have the right routing number. I have the right account number. While you're on the phone with the escrow company, verify everything. So don't email, because you know what? That email that you received could have been hacked, and you would be emailing back and forth with the hacker, not the escrow company. Make sense so far? That's why a lot of escrow companies, they go to different means to make sure that they're sending you their wiring instruction through a secure site. Make sense so far? If you have a question, please stop me and let me know. So next would be, now we are at the purchase contract itself. All right. Starting on the top, I'm gonna make it a little bit fun. So you're sitting there with Mr. and Mrs. Smith, and you want to write them an offer, right? They came, they say, hey, we love it. We want to write an offer. So you're gonna start writing an offer. So what you're gonna put on the name of the buyer. So who is the buyer? Mr. and Mrs. Smith sitting there, they say, hey, we love the property, we want to write an offer. So who's
Mr. and Mrs.
John
okay?
Mr.
You fell for it, so that's why I was looking. When you put Mr. and Mrs.,
Yeah.
beep, why not? Look at your pre-approval. What does it say on your pre-approval?
Oh.
Why?
He is a month.
He has, well, you know what? Bank has only approved, if bank has only approved Mr. Smith and did not approve Mrs. Smith, even though that they both sitting there and they want to write an offer, but only Mr. Smith was approved. What's gonna happen? You write Mr. and Mrs. Smith, you open escrow, you send the purchase contract to the lender, and the lender says, I'm not lending it, she has not been approved. Well, it's not the case with every lender. So what you should do, if they do want to write the offer under both names, you call the loan officer, whoever created that pre-approval, and you say, hey, Mr. Loan Officer, is it okay if I put the spouse on the contract? And according to whatever the rules is, whatever the company policy with that bank, that's what you go. Make sense? So it is important that the reason I printed and I gave you the pre-approval is just want to make sure that that's why you should have the pre-approval in front of you. You don't want to write an offer and then you have to let us say you need to redo the whole purchase contract. I don't think you want to do that. Okay, makes sense so far? So that's why before you start writing, that's why I give you the title company. So you see who's the seller. That's why I give you the pre-approval to see who's the buyer. Now, let's say Mr. Smith says, listen, I'm gonna put this under trust, or you know what, I'm gonna write an offer under a LLC. So what is the next step? You can put it. And you have to make sure that the lender is okay with it. Why? Because a lot of times lenders, they say, we don't lend to LLCs. Make sense? And they have their own rules and guidelines. So what the buyer can do, once they close escrow, they can put it under LLC. But this is a discussion between them and the lender. You call the loan officer. Hey, is it okay if I write the offer under LLC, any entity, as long as it's not the buyer's name? So if it's a trust, LLC, corporation, whatever it is, run it by the loan officer. Now, the loan officer has okayed it. And a lot of these things goes also on the listing contract. It applies toward the listing contract. Let's say that the loan officer says, you know what, you can put it under the LLC. What's the next step? There is a form called RCST-B for buyers. You're gonna have them sign that form. Why? That form is it's like an affidavit that the buyer, or there's one for the seller, there's one for the landlord, and there's one for the tenant. There are 4 different forms they all start with RCSD dash. If it's for the seller, S. If it's for the buyer, B. If it's for the landlord, it's LL. So when you look at it up in the zip form, you're gonna find the RCSD. The reason you do that, because you want to make sure whoever signing on behalf of that entity has the right to do it. And that form, it's like an affidavit saying, hey, I, Mr. Smith, am authorized to act on behalf of that LLC. Let me quickly, I'm going to talk about this next time that I have a listing contract, but just to quickly relate to a listing contract, you go, you see the property is under LLC, you get the listing under LLC, you put the LLC name on the listing contract, you go into escrow, you're in escrow, and all of a sudden, seller changes his mind, says, I don't want to sell. You're the listing agent, you're in escrow, the buyer's, his money is in escrow, everybody's set, seller says, I don't want to sell. Well, you're gonna say, hey, Mr. Solamany, listen, you're in default, you cannot do that. And then he's gonna come back and say, well, you know what? To begin with, I never had the authority to sign on behalf of the LLC. Guess what? Probably you're gonna be in a lawsuit. And as a listing agent, you're gonna be in a lot of trouble. Your deductible for your E&O is $10,000. So to begin with, probably you're out of $10,000. Because the buyer gonna come and sue you, like there's no tomorrow. Because as a listing agent, you were obligated to do your due diligence. So that's a whole different story when we do the listing contract. But the only thing you should have done whenever you're dealing with an entity, whenever you're not dealing with an individual, make sure you get a RCSD from the get-go. That would prove that you got an affidavit from the seller or the buyer that they have the right to sign and act on behalf of that entity. Make sense? So when a lot of times you say, hell, I know what, I don't want to do paperwork. The whole purpose of this disclosure, after disclosures, so later on, people, they don't come back and sue. Make sense?
Sorry, that form is RCSD.
RCSD, and then there's, depending who you're using it for. So then it has a dash. If it's for the buyer, you see a B. If it's for the seller, it's dash S. So when you go there, you're gonna see. All right, so we covered that. So first of all, we're gonna put today's date, right? You double click and automatically today's date published there. Here we know it's gonna be for Mr. Smith, right? So go ahead and put Mr. Smith. All right. And then if there's a second, third, or fourth buyer, you're gonna put them there. In this instance, we learned that, you know what, only Mr. Smith was approved. Now,
But Mr. Smith, you have a first name too, right?
well, I don't want to make it complicated, yeah, but Mr.
John.
John Smith. But, well, you know what? Let's do Joe. Make sense?
Yeah.
So I got it. All right. Now, let's say this was not a house, it was a condo. And then instead of unit 104, by mistake, you put 401. And then later on, you're going to escrow and you say, oops, I made a mistake. How are we gonna kind of fix that? One of the good things, you have a APN number that we'll use as a cross-reference. So when the title company runs the prelim, the title, and you see the APN number, it's somehow between the escrow officer and everybody probably going to be able to sort out that maybe you put the wrong unit number. The second thing you have to watch out for, where it says APN number, a property can sit on two separate parcels. So one house could be sitting on two different pieces of land. Funny enough, happened to me, and it was a mess. So I sold the car wash. my car wash was sitting on 2 parcels. Escrow company screwed up, transferred 1 parcel. 3 months later, I'm getting a tax bill for a property that I don't own. I'm looking at it and saying, what the hell? By the way, I was not the agent. And you know what? I had to go, actually I could have, in a way, I could have really messed around with the buyer and say, hey, I didn't study that piece. And because actually the way that the car wash was, I could have practically put a wall there and say, hey, that back section is mine and have fun with it. So you know what? Watch out for those. When you do transactions, if there's more than 1 parcel number, you have an option. Sometimes you can put it here, or there's another section under number 6 other terms. You point out the following parcel numbers should be included in the transaction. I'm gonna go get there when I get back. Other terms under number 6. So these are where you put the additional parcel numbers to make sure that the right parcels were transferred when you were doing the sale. Make sense so far? All right. So purchase price. Okay, going to the listing, the property is 2.9, right? So let's say you made an offer. Well, you have to go back to the pre-approval and making sure that the buyer is pre-approved for the amount. So for how much? What does it say on the pre-approval?
3.5.
Lucky.
Wow.
So
I'll be 2.4 votes.
not happening. All right, so you know what? One thing you want to always check, making sure. Now, the second thing you want to make sure that as you're doing that, you know what? Probably the lender requires that the buyer would have 20% down, right? 20% down. That's when you get a loan. Says the bank says, "Hey, I would lend you 80%. You have to come up with 20%, right?" So you calculate 20% of 3. Let's say I was making an offer at 3 million. 20% gonna be about 600. So you ask the buyer, "Listen, Mr. Buyer, along with your package, I need to submit your pre-approval. Also, I need to show to the seller that you have the 20% down payment." Right? So you ask this, Mr. Buyer, "Can you send me some bank statement showing that you have not only the 600, but you also need for closing costs?" So instead of 600, maybe you want to go to 650 or $700,000 so you can cover the closing costs. So when you trying to create a package to submit your offer to the listing agent, what are you gonna need? You're gonna need the purchase contract, you're gonna need the pre-approval, and you need proof of funds. Make sense? All right. So let's not 30 million, it's too expensive. All right. Now, going next, you have,
I think it was 3.5.
well, that was
Oh, you said, yeah,
the
something.
buyer is approved up to that
Yeah,
limit,
yeah,
but we're gonna make an offer at 3 million. All right, so next, close of escrow shall occur on, so you have 2 options. You can say in how many days, so you click that, and then this highlights, and you can say 30 days. Or let's say, you know what, you're writing an offer in November, and the buyer needs to close this, not in 30 days, not in 45 days, it has to be done by or before Christmas Day. So he wants to close by December 23rd. So you don't want to be too close to Christmas, so it has to be done by, certain date. Or maybe you have a 1031 exchange, and if it goes past that date, it's not gonna fly, then it would not qualify for the 1031 exchange. So in that instance, you know what, you're gonna say, hey, I need to this escrow to close by whatever date it might be. It could be, I want to close it by September 30th. So it gives you a choice, either a date or in how many days. Make sense? I think you guys are safe to put 30 days as your, you know what, as your template. So whenever you're writing an offer, most people will go with the 30 days. So my recommendation is when you're creating a template, put 30 days there. Also, when you're doing your template, don't put anything for the seller's brokerage firm. Just on your template, put your information. So whenever you're trying to use your template, already all your information is there. Now, when you're doing this, in this instance, since I'm representing both sides, I have to check mark buyer and seller, dual agency. But if it was a different, if it was, it was not the case, then you got, Keller Williams representing the seller, and this company is representing the buyer. Makes sense? That's in the instance that it was done with two separate companies. Make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. And let's put this the correct way. Next is initial deposit. Initial deposit customarily is 3%. Do you guys know why it's not 4% or 5%? Have you ever thought about it that you always heard 3% down payment, and I mean your initial deposit? It was never, why do you not do 5%? I don't know. All right, so when you go down the contract, there is a clause there called liquidated damages. Liquidated damages that the buyer and seller initial. It means that in the event that the buyer or the seller default, the maximum that the seller can penalize the buyer is 3%. I'm gonna show you the liquidated damages. That's why if the maximum that the seller can penalize the buyer is 3%, it would not make sense to put a higher number there. Make sense?
Yeah.
So that, if you ever wondered why did we always doing 3% as an initial deposit, what is an initial deposit? It's a consideration. So you know what? I'm interested, I'm putting some money down. This is my show, what as we call skin in the game. This is my consideration. And in the old contracts, it had to be, I think if you read the real estate bylaws, it has to be a nickel or more. There is some sort of it has to be mutual, but in the very old days, it used to be nickel or more, just for fun of it. But nevertheless, usually the seller wants some sort of money in there. So the buyer cannot just say, all right, I moved my contingency, but I don't want the property, I'm walking away. How is the seller be able to control the buyer if the buyer has nothing to lose if he wants to cancel? That's why there has to be some money there. Make sense?
Question from there. What about the buying with like a VA loan that there's 0%?
Doesn't matter. Even on that, I might not require them to do the full 3%. VA is different. On the VA, I requested the money to be considered, but on the FHA, they have to do 3.5% anyway. So even on the VA loan, it has to be done. But I personally, if I'm dealing with a VA loan, I would mandate that they do something. If it's not 3%, doesn't have to be 3%, but has to be certain amount. And again, it all depends. You're gonna do some form of interaction with the buyer, the selling agent, and all that as a listing agent. And I think it would be good to create a communication with the listing agent. Say, hey, Mr. Listing Agent, my guy is getting a VA loan. But at the same time, if I were you in this market, don't play that game, because as it is, sellers, they're not so thrilled to see a FHA loan or a VA loan. And the last thing you want to go and tell the listing agent, well, you know what, I'm making a FHA loan, and guess what? We don't feel like putting anything down. I don't know if your offer is going to go far. It's like, if I would receive it, that offer is gone. It's like, I don't even care how much the price on it, it's already gone. Because,
Headaches.
What's the headache?
FHA and VA is better, but FHA has a lot of qualifications, especially if they're making an offer on a condominium. With the FHA, not only that they approve you, they also have to approve the contents. So probably if you've been to one of the loan 101, you can ask him about that, go into detail. VA, it's 100% finance. That's a good thing. And we have, Albert has 2 or 3 clients with the VA. I also closed a couple of VAs in the last year. FHA and VA and FHA, they have almost the same qualification thing.
The guidelines, right?
Oh,
You have to follow the same guidelines for
Right,
appraisal.
it's just that even the, if you were ever working with the FHA or VA buyers that they're looking on condos or townhouses, before you show them a unit, call the listing agent. Is this complex approved for VA or FHA? If it's not, you're wasting it. And sometimes the listing agent won't know. So if you're working,
I would say most of the time.
most of the time, yeah. I think Albert became an expert in this. And then the best way is, you send the address to your loan officer that specializes in VA, and they usually can check on their website and tell you if the company is approved. Like, just a word of advice when working with VA, especially going after it. The other, just generally, if you want to know a little bit more about FHA and VA, on a regular appraisal, when the appraiser goes in to appraise a property, usually what they do, they making sure that everything by code, what's the value, if the square footage is right. A general appraiser, what they do, they're not only there to check to see what the value is, also they're there to see if there are any illegal structure or what it says on the title as far as square footage. Does it also compares to what he sees? If on title it shows 2 bedroom, and the appraiser goes there and sees 4 bedroom, it doesn't. There's a permit for it. Why on the title it says 2 bedroom, and I'm here doing appraisal, why is it 4 bedroom? So this is a regular appraiser coming in, just making sure that everything good. Now with the FHA, he does a mini inspection. So he would go and make sure that you have hot water. He would make sure that the pool is full. He would make sure that the heater is working. Why? Because somebody that's getting an FHA loan or VA loan, they're usually financially stressed. And they don't want to lend to somebody that has to come in, fix the pool, fix the AC, fix the water heater. So they want to make sure the essential items are in a working condition. There is a hot water there. So you don't be surprised if your FHA appraiser coming in and starting to turn on your hot water. I said, is it doing what the hell? Why does it turning the AC and doing that? It's just that they want to make sure that they don't care about cooling, but essential part of the house is having some sort of form of a furnace or something to keep the individual warm and for them to have hot water. So these are some of the different means. And then you know what? When you are here with the lender, they can give you a little bit more. All right, so initial deposit doesn't have to be 3%, but it's good. Now, in the old days, it used to be that the initial deposit was in the form of a check. And then, if looking at you guys all, none of you guys go around, but when 20 years ago, when I got an offer, I got a check. The buyer would write me a check to the brokerage. I would have to come in, I have to log it in and put it in the box. And my company had it. If the offer was accepted, then my company would stamp on the back and endorse it to the escrow company. So that's how it used to be in the dinosaur years. Now it's different. Now,
I had one 3 years ago.
what?
Someone writing a check.
Unfortunately, yeah, but you know what? That's why we still have the option here. It tells you how you're gonna put in your 3%. And by the way, doesn't have to be 3%, could be $1, so that's all negotiable between the buyer and seller. Now the default is electronic funds, which means wire. And then I received an offer from an agent, and she put wire. And she wrote in here, wire. And she pretended to be top producer. She has sold $100 million. So when she wrote that in, I said, let me check her out. She looked on the same listing. She's making it, she wrote an offer, and I said, let me check her out, let me see. And then right away, as I was looking at her offer, her license started with 020. Right. So she probably got her license in the last 3 years. So she's telling me, oh, I sold $100 million. I Google it, there's no sauce. So I tell her, listen, a friendly advice, you know what, when you're right, because both in our offers and the counter offers, she was making mistakes. So I felt bad. I coached her and said, you know what, you really don't need to write wire because it's default. Oh, so-and-so brokerage, this top producer is writing wire. All right, but I told her, listen, that's you don't need to write wire because the default, and you don't have to go far. You know what? Electronic funds transfer. What's another word for electronic wire? That's a wire transfer. So, just in case your client says, I'm gonna wire, it's already there. Now, the other option, your client might say, hey, I'm not up to date, I don't care for any of those. I would give you either a cashier's check or a personal check.
So what is the difference? One of them is more reliable, right?
Which one?
The cashier's check.
No, I'm comparing wire
Oh.
to electronic fund transfer, it's the same.
No. Oh.
Okay, now you have another option of cashier's check and personal check. You know what? In the last few years, there was very seldom that I've done either a personal check or cashier check. All right, and there are 2 reasons. First of all, check would be nonsense nowadays, because nowadays, even a cashier check, there's a hold on a cashier for you to know. So it used to be you have a cashier check, it was gold. I have a cashier check, take it. Now, they even putting a hold on a cashier check. So let you know. All right.
If you don't X anything out, then it's by default KFC.
Yeah, by default, it's gonna be electronic wire, so you don't have to write anything here.
Okay.
All right? All right, there is an or B, buyer deposit with the agent, So there is other options, but don't waste your time. Then there's B, increase of deposit. Buyer shall deposit with us for increase of amount of within. Now, let's say you buy this house, there is an issue. Or, you know what, this is gonna be, the seller says, hey, this is gonna be 6 months escrow. And so, you know what? Am I gonna put 3% in escrow for 6 months? No. So what we do is we do have sometimes a 6 months escrow. So what we do, we say, hey, the 3%, for example, for this property would be how much? It would be about $90,000, right? So we're gonna say, listen, I would give you 20,000, 30,000 right now, and in 5 months I will increase my deposit to, additional 60,000, 30,000 now, $60,000 in X amount of time to bring it up to the full 3%. Make sense? Make sense? Everybody? So in case you're wondering why you have 2 sections for increased deposit, that's the case. Next is, all right, now we're going into the financing part of it. So the financing part, we can have an all cash offer. When you press cash offer, all of this disappears, right? You don't see anything here because you're submitting an all cash offer. But one of the things that you have to understand as a, thank you, sorry. one thing that you as a listing agent, if you're representing the seller and you receive an offer, all right, and you see an all cash offer. One of the things I want to make sure that you don't make a mistake, that to assume that since this is a cash offer, there is no appraisal contingency. Somebody can buy a property and say, hey, I'm giving you an all cash offer, but I do want the property to appraise. And then with the purchase contract, we have three major contingencies, common contingencies, right? We have, what are the three contingencies? We have but due diligence, we have loan contingency, and we have appraisal contingency, right? And as default contingency for appraisal is 17 days. So sometimes you get excited about all cash, and on the following page, you don't notice that the guy never checked marked or checked off appraisal contingency. So while you think, hey, it's a done deal, and they are about to remove contingencies in 3 days because their due diligence was in 3 days, right? Day 15, the guy say, I don't want the property. And you're gonna say, hey, listen, you don't have any other contingencies. You had your due diligence, you removed it, and it was an all cash offer. Yeah. I did have 17-day appraisal contingency, and the property doesn't appraise, I want out. Make sense? Now you have to sit in front of the seller and explain how you screwed up. Not a good feeling, just to let you know. Thank God I haven't done that. Makes sense so far? If you don't understand it, please let me know. The reason I corrected her when she said inspection contingency, and this is a because I mentally, subconsciously, I don't want you to use the word inspection contingency because you think it's only to do inspection, and it's not. Your due diligence is to review disclosures and reports and look other things. The buyer can review all that and remove it. So it's not only to bring an inspector in to inspect the property. Also, they get to review and approve and acknowledge the seller's disclosures and termite, the title, the prelim, which is the title report. All that has to be reviewed. Make sense? All right. Now, buyer shall within 3 days after acceptance deliver to seller such verification. You know what? Customarily, if I don't go that route, you submit an offer without the. So if you, in this instance, if you're writing an all cash offer and you don't provide a bank statement that is equal to the full amount and over the purchase price, the listing agent is gonna have issues. Hey, you're a cash offer. And I see instead of 3 million, you're only showing $1 million. Where the hell are you gonna get the rest? So the seller is concerned, hey, if you only have $1 million, what if you cannot get a loan? You're putting all cash. So, you know, from the get-go, the seller needs to see that if it's all cash, the full amount. If you put in 20%, they need to see the bank statement showing that the buyer has it. Make sense? Next. Now, going to the loan part, first loan, it could be a standard conventional loan, FHA, VA, or seller financing. Conventional loan is your regular 20% down. It's 20% down, straightforward. If you gonna get FHA loan or VA loan, as soon as you click that, let me remove the all cash. As soon as I press the FHA, did you see here it says FHA disclosure was automatically added to the transaction? So there is a disclosure that gets added to your offer that you have to submit. The good thing or the bad thing about that disclosure, it gives the buyer a way out. That, and then, you know, if when they go into the process, and that's why sellers, they don't like FHA loans, to accept offers that they have an FHA loan. Because there is they automatically populates a disclosure stating that if the loan is not approved, the buyer gets to cancel and get a full refund. So at any time, FHA clients can cancel and walk away because there's a disclosure attached. That's one of those things that concerns sellers. Make sense? So that's when I tell you sellers, that sellers look at FHA and they really don't want to work with a client that is a FHA loan, that's one of their concerns. Now, there is a cure for that. You can either disregard the disclosure or write something to the fact that the buyer is not gonna do that. But nevertheless, that's one of the things. So if I look in my forms, as soon as you check mark that or did the VA, it automatically populated a disclosure. Now, if you're getting a loan, depending on what kind it is, you have to tell how much it is. So usually it's 80%. So basically you take the calculator, you take 3 million and you say, listen, I'm gonna borrow 80%. 80% of 3 million is 2.4.
Yeah.
Okay, so your loan amount is 2.4. Now, it could be that, you know what, you work something out, that there's a second loan, there's a secondary loan coming from a different source. It could be even a seller financing. So if I press on that, guess what? There's a form for that. There's another disclosure that it would state out, it would spell out what's gonna be the terms of this seller financing, what's the percentage and of what's gonna take place. So that's gonna be, so you're asking the seller, listen, would you do a seller financing? So while you're getting a 2.4 from the bank, you might get an additional $200,000 from the seller. Now, few things to consider if ever gets done. First of all, the lender might not be okay with the seller finance. You know, say, hey, listen, you're borrowing too much, we don't feel comfortable. So if you're ever thinking of doing any form of a negotiation with the seller to help you with the down payment or finance part of it, make sure that your number one lender is okay. Otherwise, you're wasting your time. Second, with the seller financing, you wonder why would the seller finance? If the market is really bad, if the market was not as hot as today, let's say the market was down other way around. Tons of properties on the market and not enough, buyers. So that the sellers are very desperate to sell a property. And the seller knows that the buyer is probably even overpaying for the property. So the seller says, you know what, I have nothing to lose. But then do that, I would finance $200,000, $200,000 or whatever the amount is, and take a, gamble. If the buyer pays it, pays it. If not, I was selling it overpriced and I sold my property. So there are a lot of times that seller will be willing to do the seller financing, but at the same time, one thing I want you to understand that when you want to even enter into the conversation, prior to that, talk to your lender. Lender might not be so happy. Now, when you want to protect your buyer, I'm gonna go a step back. So if you're getting a conventional loan, what type of a loan it is? Is it a ARM or is it a 30-year fix? You have the purpose of a loan contingency is to tell the seller, listen, my loan didn't get approved, and that's why I'm canceling. And it says, on what basis? Why your loan didn't get approved? It says, well, you know what? I was a high risk, and they won't let me. Now, if you leave this area blank, don't put anything here, and let's say if I left it blank, or you should have see what's the 30-year fixed interest rate, let's say 4% and not to exceed 1 point. So a point for you guys that knew and you don't know what a point is 1% of the amount that you borrow. So if you're borrowing 2,400,000, 1 point is 1% of that. That's a fee that the bank charges you, and they call it a point. The reason they don't say 1% because then you have the interest rate that's a percentage, and then you have a percentage that they charge you for the fee. So they say point. This way you don't get confused, and you know that whenever you give point, it's a fee. It's not an interest rate that you pay on the money. Make sense? Yeah. So this is the point is a fee that you pay to the bank for their
Does
service.
that then reduce your principal amount by that
No,
point?
no, that's a fee. Fee means that they're charging you to give you a loan.
Got it.
Now, you telling the seller, listen, this is my condition. I'm willing to purchase this property only if my interest rate is no maximum than 4%. And then I'm willing to pay up to 1 point and maximum 4% to, you know what, get this done. If you leave it blank, let's say I don't put anything there, and you go back to the seller and say, my loan didn't get approved. Says, what was wrong? They say, hey, they told me we're gonna charge you 6%. So I says, you know what? You can buy it down. There is something called buy down. What's a buy down? Instead of a 1 point, you pay 3 points or 4 points. And then instead of 6%, the bank lowers the interest rate. So the seller says, hey, tough luck. Go get hard money, find some other form of an interest. And instead of, if this is blank, you know what? I don't care if you have to pay 8%, get a hard money, or if you have, instead of 1 point, you pay 4 points to reduce your interest rate to match this. Make sense? So in lending, the buyer has an option to pay more points and lower their interest rate. Some banks, they do that. All right. So the seller can tell you, you know what? If you don't put any of this in, I don't care. Go pay higher interest. Go pay more points. Get the loan done. So that's why it's important to put these limitations here. So when you have only a loan contingency left and you want to walk away, the seller doesn't tell you, hold on, you cannot cancel. You can get the loan. Go get the hard money. Make sense? Yes? All right, so now you understand the importance why every time you write an offer, you have to put, now, you don't want to put something unrealistic. So don't put 2.5%. Even though if you have a pre-approval, that on the pre-approval says 2.5%, always there has to be like a 0.5% to 1% gap. Makes sense? So, you know, if you check with your lender and say, hey, listen, Mr. Lender, what's the going interest rate? And it says, you know what, right now we are at mid-4s or mid-3s, 3.5%. So when you're talking to a loan officer and tells you you are there, you add 1% to that. And if he tells you we are in mid-3s, 3.5%, 3.5%, so you put 4.5 in that box. You have to leave a little bit of room. Make sense? All right. So that's one other way of you protecting the buyer. Additional terms, things you can do here. Sometimes you can ask the seller to pay the closing costs. So one of the things that you can put here, seller, seller pay buyers non-reoccurring closing cost. That's non-reoccurring closing cost. What is that? it does not reoccur. Reoccur like your mortgage, reoccurring. Tax is reoccurring, right? So what are the non-reoccurring closing costs? Escrow fee, lender fee, title fee, things that there are only one-time fee. So you can put in there, but I want to make sure you guys understand what it stands for. So if the listing agent is also new in code, it says, hey, what is NRCC? You can spell it out. Non-reoccurring closing costs. I usually don't put it on the first page because I don't want the seller to see it. I usually put it on the second page, just to let you know. And then also, not only that you put that, there has to be a cap on it. So you cannot say whatever it is, as much as it is.
All right.
You say, so the next part is you add not to exceed $10,000. So there has to be a cap on it. Make sense? So
Since we're in the financing section, the title escrow fees go there too as well, or does that goes in a different section?
we're gonna get there, but we are here just trying to, ask the seller to pay for it.
So here it includes title and escrow.
Yeah, so we're asking the seller to pay, because we're gonna get to the title part, most often, because on the second page, we check mark for the seller to pay for the title costs. Then, when the buyer gets his closing statement, there's a fee for title. And the buyer calls, say, hey, on the purchase contract, the check mark seller to pay for title insurance. And why is that for charging me for title? So just for you guys to understand, there's a difference. We have title insurance. It's a title insurance that the seller purchased to insure the title of the property. The one that the buyer is paying for is a title insurance for the mortgage, not for the property. So if they getting a financing, there is a title insurance, and that's buyer's responsibility. So a lot of times you're gonna get that call from the buyer telling you, hey, I see on my closing costs, there's a fee for title. So that's where that fee is. It's not to insure the title of the property, but for the mortgage. And since it's a mortgage, a buyer can buy all cash. And this was only for borrowers that they're buyers that they're borrowing. Make sense? All right. Now, next, on every page, you're gonna see initial at the bottom. The reason that you're gonna see initial on every single page is to make sure that the buyer has received and reviewed every single page. So if you're gonna see at the bottom of every page an initial, is to protect you. So you know what? The buyer cannot come and say, hey, you never showed me this page. Well, I didn't know, I never knew all this because I never read this page. Hey, buyer, you remember putting your initial at the bottom? That was the purpose. So you acknowledge that you read this page. Make sense? Now, going on the right, we made an offer for $3 million, right? And then we have put our initial deposit was 3%. So the 3% was how much? $90,000. So 3 million minus 90 minus the amount of loan that we're gonna get minus the financing that you're gonna get from the seller, the balance gonna be 310 that the buyer has to bring down as a down payment. Make sense? It's automatically calculates it for you. So if I remove seller's financing from here, and there's no seller financing, now to close the deal, about maybe a week before closing, escrow is gonna call the buyer and say, listen, before the lender funds money, you need to bring an additional 510 plus what? What can be the additional money that they have to bring in? Closing costs. Closing costs would be, hey, you have to pay escrow, you have to pay whatever, the lender fee, all those other. Make sense? Second page. When you're making an offer, verification of down payment, that's the bank statement that we spoke about. And it's either gonna be something that is already attached, or you're gonna tell the seller, listen, in 3 days after acceptance, I'm gonna provide you with a verification of down payment, or you can check mark verification attached. I think on your when you're making your template, check mark that, because you don't want to send an offer without your approval funds. All right, now, this is the first contingency that you see, appraisal contingency and removal. You remember I told you when you see our cash offer, make sure you come back and see that this thing here is check mark. If this is not check mark, and a lot of times you oversee that, guess what? The buyer, you give the buyer 17 days as a default to get out of the deal. And again, that's assuming that he has done an appraisal and the appraisal was not at the price that he wanted to be. Make sense?
The verification attached for age, is that a proof of funds?
Then bank statement.
Is there a time period it has to be the bank for it to be verified?
For the purpose of the seller, no, but for the purpose of the lending, yes. So the lender might require that the funds are needed 2 to 3 months.
Yeah.
Or depending on what type, there are a lot of different programs when it comes to lending. If you were getting based on your business and your bank account and all that, they might want to see it even up to 6 months, but standard, they want to see at least that the money was there for at least a couple months. Again, that's something that you know, that's gonna be between the buyer and the thing,
Right.
but for your purpose,
That's the screen or
As-
bank statement.
banks it. For that last month, like, you know, if right now you're in September, probably all you have is August, right? So make sure it's 2021 and not 2020, you know, and. Alright. Now, next, loan application. Within 3 days after acceptance, buyer shall deliver to seller a letter from buyer's lender or a loan broker stating that based on it, So I have actually canceled escrow on a buyer on those bases. I had a very not cooperative selling agent. They were on vacation in Hawaii while they were in escrow, and the buyer was on her own, and she did not understand that you have to do your due diligence, your inspections and all that, her loan to your loan. So the buyer, she took her time, she came, she negotiated the inspection and all that. And meanwhile, I'm calling the selling agent, where are you? What are you doing? What's going on? And they not returning phone call. That's why I get very nervous when selling agent is not communicating with me. And so, you know, I finally talked to the bank, say, hey, what's going on? My agent's are in Hawaii. How's my Hawaii? Great. So, and all of a sudden, she come back and says, okay, I'm going after my loan. I said, you know what? Your agent told you that they're working on it. And no, so can you provide me? I spoke with the loan officer. Can you show me what date they filled out the application? And it was like 2 days before that. And then by then we were like 15 or 16 into escrow. Unfortunately, that buyer practically cried, but I had to do what I had to do. I canceled. And she only paid for inspection, and she also paid for cancellation. But unfortunately, that was unfortunate because she had a very lousy agent. They refused to communicate. They were snobs. That's why, I have a bad experience. That's why, when I see, if I'm in a transaction and I get nervous, as soon as the selling agent is not communicating with me, I know something is wrong. That's why, because of those past experiences, I get nervous and I start doing something. I start calling the loan officer back there. I do a lot of stuff, see what's going on. If the selling agent not returning, there's something wrong. So that gives me the bad vibe, and that's what I'm going after. So in that instance, I canceled, and I went on to the next one. Nice lady, nice bar, but without reagents. So, and you know what, as a listing agent, I had to protect the stuff. At that point, I didn't, it would have been time another 3 weeks before she would have got her loan together and all that. I could have done that with any other buyer. If I start with another buyer, they can, that's the amount of time they need to do. And I didn't know what other issues, since the agents are not there, I didn't know what other issues I could have had. So it was not worth it for me on the seller.
Is there a happy ending with this other story? Does she keep the selling agent and come to you?
That's another day. That happened, but that's a different story. I'm gonna keep on telling you stories. So when you see here, loan application, it's not a joke. I have kicked out people out of escrow because of that. Loan contingency. So you have, by default, it's 21 days. But usually you reduce them. Since your guys are new, usually 17, 15, you talk to the loan officer. And just to tell you now, if your buyer calls on the 17th day or even on the 21st day and tell the lender, listen, loan officer, it's time for me to remove my loan contingency. Shall I remove loan contingency? Do you know what the loan officer is going to tell her? For her? It's your choice. I don't know. You know, unfortunately today, doesn't matter if you're the real estate agent, your loan officer, doesn't matter what type of a job you have, everybody tries to cover their behind. So when you ask them a question, they give you a bogus answer. So one thing, and it's very aggravating for the buyer because you know what, imagine you're a buyer, your agent tells you, you need to remove contingency for contract. And then you call your loan officer and say, hey, is my loan set ready to go? Can I remove my contingency? It's up to you. So it's one of those things that you have to do. So one of the things I do as when I'm like the old days before BC, before Corona, sometimes we put clients in the car showing properties in my car. So a lot of times I use that time to explain the situation. Not saying, you know what, there's gonna be time that you have to move from the contingency and the loan officer might not give you the green light because that's the nature of the business. And don't get nervous because probably the lender gonna keep on investigating you to the day you close. So if last minute they're asking you for additional paperwork and all that, don't get nervous, it's done. So I try to give them some pointers along the way that I'm showing them properties and all that. The reason I do all that, before I get to write an offer, if I slowly educate my buyer, when it's time to write an offer, they're not afraid to write an offer. Most first-time buyers, they are, when they sit and they want to write an offer, or when you tell them, listen, are you ready to go with this property? Yeah, you know, they have the hesitation. You know what? It just because they have a lot of questions that has not been answered, and that's what they are kind of not confident. But if you are able to speak with them, knowing the contract, and previously you spoke about, oh, hey, you know what? One of the conversations you can have with your buyer system. You have 3 different contingencies. You have an inspection contingency. You have the loan. You have the appraisal. Listen, worst case scenario, we're going to escrow. If we move before the contingency period, you're going to get all your deposit back, with the exception that sometimes some escrows might have $200 of a cancellation. Or maybe the worst case scenario that you pay for an inspection. Worst case scenario that you pay for your appraisal, but it's not that you lost $90,000. So it's okay, you know what, and when time comes for you to remove all contingencies and we get to a point of no return, I would let you know. I would tell you less than 5. Once you remove this, if you don't close, you're gonna lose your 3%. I will tell you when that time comes. So these are some conversation you can have with the buyer to make him feel calm, because they're signing 13 pages of contract, and it's not for $1. They are writing a $3 million contract. So any typical person writing a $3 million contract, they're gonna think twice, unless you're objecting.
Okay.
All right, make sense? All right, no loan contingency. Well, a lot of this through time, just imagine when I started, this contract used to be 3 pages. Now it's 10 pages, and mainly because every time there was a new lawsuit, they put another paragraph in, and all of a sudden, in 20 years, from 3 pages, it's 10 pages.
And then string it bigger and bigger.
I would like to take, you know what? Do you guys want to take a 10-minute break? Feed your meters, go to the restroom, come back, and we continue. Yeah, is that, I want you to not get tired. If you want to drink, use the restroom, feed your meters, and come back, and then we go for another hour. Are you guys okay? Everybody okay?
Yeah.
All right. Right now, it's 11:37. See you in 10 minutes. I hope you guys not getting bored.
Have you heard of that program, NACA? Any feedback? Trouble?
No, you know what? The clients that they're, I heard about it, but I don't know the details. I'm not yet a certified expert in it, because a lot
But
of
see,
them-
how do you, if nobody knows about it, I guess we're all kind of like,
well, you ask the the
Right.
people that you ask your questions to them. I think that's the only thing you can do. Hello. Hi. Hi. Let's show you what I have. What's that? Great. It's on hold. I'm laughing serious, Judge. I'm laughing serious, Judge. It's all, multiply. That's something, so it's on hold, 110 days. No, we have a couple of, we're gonna talk about in exercise. I'm trying to say that. Oh, yes.
Neredeyse oluyormuş.
Yeah, I have to take some. Make some coffee so you don't get, if you're getting bored, so you don't yawn. I'm sorry?
Can I borrow a pen?
So far, any questions from before? Are you there?
A lot, actually.
Lots.
I know some of them, it's very best, you look at it and you think it's only the buyer's name. And then when you start knowing what, if it's a corporation is one thing, and if they get a pre-approval, it's not only the husband and wife, something very basic, now you know it's not that basic that you thought that you're just gonna sit there and write an offer. That's why from the get-go, I took the time and I provide you with the pre-approval. And you're wondering, why the hell am I printing out and giving you a pre-approval? Or why am I giving you the title? Or why am I giving you the MLS? Those are all things while you're waiting for the others to come. Or office wants you, it's a good idea for you. Every time you want to write an offer, print out the MLS. And that's what the office requires from you. Do you guys know why? In case the listing agent goes back and changes anything, you have the original. So let's say all of a sudden the commission changes. Or they forgot to disclose something, and after they're in escrow with you, they put something in there. And you tell them, hey, you never told me that. Yeah, it's on the MLS. Guess what? So when you print the MLS version, don't only print the client, print the agent version of it that gives you all of it. So when you go on the MLS, there's different versions of report, right? The difference between the client and the agent is that when you go down, you see agent remarks.
Yeah.
On the client one, you don't have them. This is only for agents to see. Or when it gets syndicated on Zillow and all that, buyers, they don't get to see the agent remarks. And a lot of times, agent can disclose things right there, and you can miss it out. So whenever you are checking out a listing, don't just randomly pull out you can send the client version of it to your client. Like when you're printing it for yourself, print the agent detail, because there could be also on the left, you're gonna see the CSO commission. So you will know how much it is. So if later on they change the middle and say, at the time that I wrote the offer, the commission was not 2%, it was 2.5%. And on that basis, I wrote the offer. That's why these things, the offer also requires you to, when you're writing an offer, to print out the title. And if you are part of the MLS, you can go public record and pull you can pull this from the MLS. All right, so it's very easy. You go to search public record, you go in there and you pull the basic title report that very basic page and has some basic information.
I have a question. So in the bank, when they're waiting, the lender's waiting for the appraisal. It's nice to have the appraisal next to the price or value you're buying it at, but what's more important is if you're getting a $2 million loan, the property is worth at least $2 million or higher, right? Because they just want to recover their loan value, right? Different things to the south.
Yeah, that's a totally different story. Yeah, but usually, the bank usually, the reason they want 20 or 30% down, so in case the market crashes and the market crashes goes down 20%, still, as you said, and if the market goes down 20%, the bank, the owner has to sell. They can sell it at the loan amount, and the bank does not lose.
So they just want to recover their loan.
no.
So is it okay if you're buying it for 3.1 and the appraisal says it's worth 2.9 or 3?
Well, basically what happens a lot of times, if it appraises for less, the bank lends you 80% of the appraised value
So you have to cover the other,
difference.
so your equity goes up.
So, because, yeah, that's, bank, you could, you know what, if me and you, we can say, hey, let's do something between the two of us. The property worth 3 million, let's write it to 5 million, and then let's shoot the bank. Bank is stop. That's not how it works. I gotta do my own appraisal, see how much the property worth, and then do that. Make sense?
Alright, thanks.
Alright.
Yeah, makes
Alright, so no loan contingency, going down. You know, and I honestly would like for you guys to really sit down and read every sentence, because you know what? The way you're gonna feel comfortable, it's not only that the buyer that's not be concerned and saying, hey, you know what? I'm signing a 10-page. They will look for guidance through you, so really understand. So that's why a lot of times, for my own mentees, I make them do their own paperwork, and I don't want them to hire a TC, because at least for the first batch, I wanted to do the paperwork so they can explain it to their client. Because if from the get-go, they hire a TC to do the paperwork, you know, they would never learn, you know, what the paperwork are.
What's the point of having no loan contingency? Like, what is that?
You know what, every contingency is a way out for the buyer.
Mhm.
So let's say, you know, somebody may maintain, get a loan, but they don't want any loan contingency, and you want them. So it could be a situation that you already have a line of credit from your other property. So let's say you own another property, you have, let's say you own a $5 million home, right?
Yeah.
And then you only have $1 million loan on it. And the bank says, hey, I would give you $2 million down the credit. So basically, and then you want to buy another property which is $3 million. So, but in reality, you only have $1 million, and then you're using $2 million from the land equity from the other property. So that land equity, this property doesn't have to get appraised or anything. You're just taking that, you're borrowing that money.
Because you already have collateral on that.
That. So basically, if you're making an offer at 3 million and you're only providing $1 million proof of funds, the seller says, hey, where's the rest of the money? And why you don't have a loan contingency? Hey, I'm already getting it from, I'm getting a line of credit from another property. So I don't care what's happening here. The bank not gonna
Okay.
appraise this. Make sense?
Yeah.
Fine. So that's again, be careful when you dealing with clients. If they ever removing their contingencies, you have to be very careful. All right, so one of the other contingencies that you can have, let's say you're dealing with a buyer says, listen, I'm willing to buy a property, assuming that I can sell my property. So contingent on sale of a property, COP. So this is where this agreement and the buyer ability to obtain financing are contingent upon sale of property owned by the buyer as specified in the attached addendum. So basically, you're gonna tell the sellers, Mr. Seller, the only way we're gonna close escrow on your property is if my buyer is able to close escrow on them. So that's why you have a COP. It gets a little bit complicated. So, you know what, as a new agent, make sure that from the get-go, there is, your mentor is, you know, it's there. I unfortunately we had an instance that there was some glitches with the COP that clients have, agents have to the COP. So it has to be handled carefully. So make sure somebody is assisting you in that situation. Again, as soon as you check mark this, the COP pops up. I would highly recommend at least take a look at it so you have some basic knowledge of the that form. Make sense? Anytime you have concern. Alright, so there are other addendum that's or these documents that can be incorporated in this RPA. So you can say, listen, let me give you an example. Others, you can put KW disclosures. Okay, as you know, KW has two different disclosures. What are the two disclosures that KW has? One is affiliated disclosure, and the other one is a general, purchase addendum. Affiliated, we're letting the buyer know, listen, we work with this title company, and they paying us money, and we're working with this other company, escrow company, Pacific Coastline Escrow, and they're affiliated with us. So most big companies, Corer Banker has West Coast Escrow, so they have to disclose to their clients, listen, we have affiliation with X, Y, and Z. So most of these companies, as big companies, they have certain affiliation, and whenever you're doing a transaction with them, they give you the form. Also, to protect us, most major companies, they have their own disclosures, whereas it's more like an advisory to the buyer. Listen, you have to do inspection, you have to check the reports. So it's a general detailed item that it's like an advisory for the buyer to sign. Now, this has to be signed both by the buyer and the seller. A lot of times there is a pushback by the seller. Hey, you're not representing me. Why do I have to sign this? So you're gonna be your office, Keller Williams tells you, hey, you need to upload this to get your paycheck. And you need to have the buyer and seller's signature on it. And then you're sending it to the listing agent saying, listen, listing agent, please have the seller sign this. And he says, I don't have to. So there are two ways you can go about it. Either you put it in the contract, Keller Williams disclosures. And once it's here and the seller signs it, he has to sign the KW disclosures. Or if you forget and you send it to them and they don't want to sign it, just make sure that the other agent sends an email saying seller refused to sign the KW. And that's, you just print that and upload it to the company. Make sense? Now that could be one. There could be you create an addendum number one to this. Let's say there's not enough room to put under other terms, and you want to create some guideline. So you create a addendum. Is practically, just to let you know, addendum is another form get attached. It's like whenever you don't have enough room to write, you add an addendum, and it creates additional space to put other terms and conditions, or incorporate additional terms and conditions into your contract. Make sense? So when you put that in, you're letting the seller know, listen, this is our purchase contract, but there is an attached addendum to it. So later on, they cannot say, we never knew about the addendum. Right? When we wrote the offer, it was already written that there's an addendum incorporated. Make sense? Now, if you read on it, there is a backup addendum, there is a septic, short sale, probate, trust, there's no of them, and then there's a lot more. It could be the COP already, it's there, but on and off you can have different things. Other terms. Selling agent is related to buyer. Common. A lot of times you're writing offers for your family, right? You have to disclose that. One, seller to pay buyers non-recurring closing costs. I usually put it there. I don't like to put it on the first page because I don't want the seller. I want them to enjoy the first page before it goes to the second page. So seller to pay buyers non-recurring costs, not to exceed X amount, to make sure that when you already do that, you put the cap on. You know what? let's say the property was previously in escrow. Seller to provide all reports and disclosures for previous escrow. So anything that you have a demand for, you put it in there. Let's say that there is a guest house and it has income or a tenant in the back. Seller to provide a copy of a lease for the bank unit, or if the ADU, which is very common right now, you can ask for it right here. So provide that lease contract, so you know how long is the lease, how much it is, what's the, so if that's essential for you, you can put all those in there. So depending on what's your situation is, you can incorporate it there. All right, next. It's allocation of cost. Let me go to the first page.
We might want to admit that person because I'm trying to get on Zoom.
Honestly, we were not supposed to do that. All right. If you go back to the top, it says it's a residential purchase agreement and a joint escrow instruction. The reason it's not, doesn't say just a purchase agreement, because not only that we are negotiating the price, we also saying who's gonna pay for what, how long it's gonna be. So this way, when you take the purchase contract and you email it to the escrow officer, they have a sense what company is gonna be the NHD, who's going to be the tower company, who's paying for what. So this is not only just a negotiation of price, but also a making clear of who's responsible for what. So that's why there's an instruction class. Next, one of the things that the seller has to provide is what we call it, and you guys should get used to it, NHD, natural hazardous disclosure. So you're gonna hear a lot of NHD. So get used to it, natural hazardous disclosure. What is a natural disclosure? It's basically, it usually gets done, but it has to be coming from the seller, but since sellers are not experts, they have a third company do it. And what it is, basically a disclosure, a report telling you what's going on environmentally around the property. Is there a fault line, earthquake fault line? Is there a gas? Is there, any sort of a thing, and we have a couple of brochures for NHD, maybe you want to visit the website, you get in there. Take the NHD class because that report sometimes can be narrowing for buyers, and then the NHD person can tell you how to water down the report, because sometimes it's scary, and for example, at times, if you have a puddle in certain areas, they can, and I'm not exaggerating, that company, if there's a puddle in a certain area, they would consider that a flood. And then going into a earthquake fault, it could be a fault that was active maybe a million years ago or about 10,000 years ago. So some of those are, the timeline are so bad, so it's scary when they say, hey, this area there is a fault line. That fault line could have not been active for thousands of years, and still in the NHG you're gonna see it. So if there is a class, be here so she can explain all that to you. That's not my expertise, not her expertise. So in this instance, usually sellers pay for that. They pay for the NHD. Environmental and others, we used to ask for, a clue report. Now we don't ask for them because most NHDs, they don't do it. Clue report usually would have include any insurance claim on the property. So because why is that important? You're purchasing a property and all of a sudden the buyer goes to get insurance, and all of a sudden it's like 2,000, they're asking for 10,000, or they're declining to insure the property, and you're wondering why. And then you find out that the previous owner had 3 claims within like 3 years, there was 3 times that property was under flood. They had burst pipe, and insurance paid so much for it. And insurance said, you know what, this property, you're not gonna insure. And then that's a public record for all insurance companies have access to it. So when they go to other insurance companies, they have the same, no, we don't want to insure. So one of the things that's a good idea for you guys to check always, before you remove your due diligence contingency, make sure that your buyer goes out and tries to get insurance. Don't leave it for last minute, because last minute you're about to close this, but your buyer goes to get insurance, and then all of a sudden he finds out, hey, there were few different claims on insurance. I closed this for 2 months ago, and my client went to get insurance, and they found there was a claim, and the seller did not disclose. So the agent called me and said, hey, you need to remove contingencies. I was 2 days late. I said, listen, my buyer's still doing their due diligence, and believe me, they need time. So she started being very rough. I said, listen, before I make any accusation, I want to check something. And they said, what the hell are you talking about? I said, listen, this is the case. I don't want to make any accusation of the seller. We are doing our due diligence. But last year, there was a plumbing issue here, and the seller did not disclose. So we are, before we come out and tell you for a fact that your seller is not disclosing everything, you want to check. And then she went back to the seller and said, confirm, yeah, I did. How come you didn't disclose? So because of that, I had another 3 days, so she found it. And I bought myself another 5 days. So meanwhile, maybe I didn't tell her what's going on. I used it at the time that I wanted. So the seller screwed up, didn't disclose. I waited, but she told me to remove contingency. I said, I don't know. Just because of that, seller did not disclose. That one bought me another 5 days. So but make sure, funny enough, the seller has multiple time situations that they can disclose. We have 2 forms, TDS and SPQ. It's a transfer disclosure and seller property questionnaire. They have those 2 forms, they have the opportunity to disclose. And the reason there's 50 questions on that is to jog their memory so they can disclose that there was an insurance pay and they still miss out. So
Question on that really quickly, if the property was given to like inherited and now.
that's different. Those probates, one of those things that you do a ESD exemption. It's an exemption from giving a report. That's why they are given an exemption. Instead of doing SPQ, you do ESD. They call the phone call ESD. It's just that because it gets you exempt because they never lived there or they were not in possession of that property. That's why they're exempt from.
So if
And
you
they
were
cannot
to
be
leave in
sued.
trust, that's the same thing.
Yeah. Minor. Let's say the person that handling the transaction is the son. He's doing the exam, but he was aware of those. And you can prove that the son knew. Why? Because the next door neighbor saw the son be here and take care of that issue. So you have a witness that the son knew that and he failed to disclose. That the part becomes a little bit gray. So a lot of times, if I'm doing a probate or trust, I would make that thing. Listen, you don't need to fill out the SPQ, but I would recommend you doing it and disclose whatever it is, because if you disclose, they cannot do anything about it. But if you don't, they can come after. Make sense? All right. So here, other reports. Second one could be a full property termite report. Why do I use the word full property termite report? Because unfortunately, I have come across all type of crews during my 20 odd years, 20 to 3 years. To give you an example, we did a termite, and then the seller told the termite company, don't do the garage or any other structure, just do the main house. So we do a walkthrough, and we find out there's a beehive at the garage. We come back and tell them,
Oh,
Wow.
or his, you have to be careful with your very extensive.
I thought you were pulling the camera for a second.
Oh, that's what I thought, you were pushing the table, I was like, wait, what?
So I had a client that they had one of those shots in their glove compartment that if they ever get bit by a sting by a bee, they have to right away do it. Guess what? I'm going to there, we saw the beehive, and I'm telling the listing agent, why the hell the beehive is still here? And he played dumb. I called the termite company and tell them, why the hell there's a beehive here, didn't you completed the termite? He says, the seller told us just to do the main structure and not anywhere else. So, you know what, that got us over $10,000 because I claimed to sue the agent and the seller. And I got a $10,000 price action, otherwise I got sue the hell out of it. And that's it. I decided not to work with that company. So with that in mind,
They
that's
told the inspectors to.
the termite company only to do the structure and not the garage, and there was a fee. And my clients freaked out because they were allergic to people. What a coincidence, huh?
Yeah,
All right, so that's why I learned that whenever I check mark that, do the full property termite report. And not just a termite report. So if you ever wanted, now, this is very tricky because some lenders, it can come back and haunt you. Let's say the seller says, I'm not paying for it, you pay for it. And then you end up needing to check the place. And the seller says, hey, I'm not gonna move twice out of this property. I'm moving out when the property is sold. And if they do the tenting, practically it's like moving out. You have to get all your food out. You have to be out of the property for 3 days and all that. So there's a company. And then you come back and the lender says, I'm not gonna close escrow till I see a completion. So you get stuck. So to do a full property termite report, it's about sometimes free, sometimes $100. So you know what? This is a choice that you have to make. You can pay for it yourself, and then part of your repair request, part of your due diligence, ask the seller to pay for it. So this is up to the buyer and you if you want to include that in your contract or not, because that can practically screw up the loan. So again, it's a choice to make. Next, this is at the bottom, and most people forget to tag it. This is for mandatory compliance that you have to do. Smoke detectors. So just in case as you're new, smoke detector goes in the bedroom and a hallway. Not in the kitchen. You don't need a smoke detector in the kitchen, especially if you're not a good cook and you burn food. So you don't want that to go off all the time. And then you need a carbon monoxide or a combo, which is a smoke detector and a carbon monoxide in the hallway. Okay, so let's say there's a hallway to 3 bedrooms. You need a combo, which is smoke detector and combo and carbon monoxide in there. Let's say you have a living room here, you have 2 bedrooms on that side and 1 bedroom on that side. Guess what? 1 carbon monoxide in the interior on before you enter the bedroom on that side, and another one on that side, because now you're going 2 different directions. And if you only put 1 there, that room not going to be protected. Also, 2 stories, 1 on the first floor, 1 on the second floor. Again, you don't need it for living room, you don't need it for dining room. I see it put all there. Again, I'm not an expert. There's a retrofitting company that come out, inspect and do. The other thing you should know, if you ever have a Rental properties, it has to be hardwired. You cannot use battery on it. So just to let you know. Otherwise, it has junk.
Previous point, just a quick question. The disclosures were that the seller has disclosed the issues. Those forms are addendums or are they already included?
No, there's a, TDS, transfer disclosure, is a mandatory form per contract, and it's gonna be.
It's already there.
It's there, you have to upload it, give it to them, fill it out. When it comes to TDS, you cannot touch it in any shape or form. You give it to the seller, fill it out, give it back. And if they made a mistake, they made a mistake. You cannot tell them to correct it, and you cannot do it for them, just to let you know. All right, so this is that number, next one is, seller shall pay for the cost of compliance with mandatory governmental inspection and report. There's a form called 9A report. 9A report is called city report. Basically, it's what the city has in regards to, whatever permits, like sewer line permits or whatever permits that we put out. When it costs about $72, escrow gets, the seller pays escrow orders the order, 9A report. It takes between week to 2 weeks to come. So my recommendation when you open escrow, the first thing you want to do, two things that takes a long time. One is the 9A report or the city report, and the second one is your HOA document. That also takes a while to get. So if you're selling a condo, if you're a listing agent on a condo, as soon as you open escrow, those are the two things you want us to order right away.
The HOA, what was the first one?
City report, or what do you call it, 9A report. Okay.
Thank you.
Again, as far as retrofitting, low flow shower, water devices, you need bracing the water heater. Now, also, depending where you are, LA County, you need like earthquake gas valve, but West Hollywood and some other cities do. It's not mandatory. That is, it's not mandatory. But for whole California, smoke detector and carbon monoxide, it's mandatory. So there are things, the retrofittings that they go by cities, and there's retrofitting that goes through all California. All right, next one, search right to cost of mandatory governmental inspection report. These are basically what that covers, and you usually check mark seller. Now, when it comes to, now we're going to escrow and title, you check mark both. And then usually you say 50-50 each to pay their own. Who's gonna be the escrow holder? A lot of times, we're gonna ask for, just to get the deal, we wanna be flexible. So what we do is seller's choice. So, we try to be fair. Title report. Title report is usually seller's choice. Okay, and what the title insurance for you, if you don't know what the title insurance is, to make the buyer comfortable, the seller pays for title insurance, and basically the title ensuring that the chain of title, there were no frauds. So, somebody can come and say, hey, listen, at one point my grandpa owned that property and somebody did a fraud and took it out. So originally, my grandpa is the original owner and he has all the proof. Guess what? That's where title insurance comes in. That's why you pay title insurance to protect you just in case there's any fraud. All right. City and county transfer tax, that's something that the seller pays. Unless you are in the REO, bank sometimes makes you pay, unfortunately. Now, if you're selling a condo, seller shall pay for HOA transfer fee, because for the HOA to give you a copy of the CCNRs, bylaws, and all the financial, all of that. Imagine sometimes it could be like about 200 pages or 300 pages. So they charge you a hefty number, like $300 to $800. So that's something we mandate the seller to pay. The second one, and most not new, but most agents, they don't know what the hell it is. They just see HOA, so automatically they check market. It's for the seller to pay. And I always have to counter that and say, hey, this is not normal. Sometimes to get the complex approved for FHA or VA, you have to pay the HOA fee to give you extra documents and all that. That's not seller's responsibility. So whenever I see somebody, wrote that in their counter, I have to counter and say, hey, please, the item number 75 to be deleted because this should not be checked marked. So, these are additional paperwork that's really not needed. All right.
Sometimes it's not needed.
Well, on a regular, no, but if it's an FHA and if the building is not approved, you need it. I'm 100%, whenever I see this, I always delete it. Or I make it the buyer's responsibility.
I had a question about this, especially in this area where there are a lot of condos. Is there like something in this office or with Keller Williams that has information on the condos in this area instead of people back and forth and getting the documents?
No, the best thing is to call the association. Because different associations, they have different history. For example, there could be assessments, there could be lawsuits. And most banks, if there's a litigation or a lawsuit going on against the HOA, they don't let. So these are questions, some of the questions that you have to ask the listing agent is that, are there any assessments? Do you know of any assessments upcoming? Are there any litigation or lawsuits? This should be your standard first questions that you ask the listing agent. And these are the first questions as a listing agent that you should ask the seller and the HOA and to know. You don't want to go into escrow to find out there is a litigation.
Is there a checklist of like questions we should be at?
No. These are things that probably you work with your mentor. There is a additional documents, and again, that's a different class. If you go to your zip form, there's something that nobody ever checks. Beside the regular library, there's a couple other libraries that give you a lot of additional forms, and nobody checks that. If you go, you're gonna see a lot of how to extend FHA, how to do net sheet. There's a lot of other documents that most agents they don't even bother with. So there are some other checklists that you can find. I would say check your zip form, but also talk to your mentor.
I have talked about it.
Yeah, not right after class.
No,
Probably.
it just seems a little like,
Yeah.
as a new agent, it seems a little frustrating that there's a lot of things that we all
That's
should
why you
know.
work with a mentor.
But like, there's no like checks like, hey, like work the area.
There's
there's a
so
lot of-
many things that if you start making a checklist, the checklist is gonna go forever.
Experience is gonna get you there.
I understand, because it's against it, but like, there's a lot of like core questions that we need to be asking or telling that there should be like, you know what, we work in Westwood, there's a lot
You
of
know what,
condos
if
where you
it's
guys be
not,
asking.
you cannot really call the listing agent and say, listing agent, can you hold, I have like 67 questions. All right, number one.
No, it's not about 6, 7 questions, it's about like top 10 questions you should be asking when you
You
deal
know
with a
what,
condo.
there are the three main, you have, FHA, litigation, and assessment. This should be your 3 number questions when you're dealing with the HOA. If you're dealing with the FHA, if not, the 2 main thing is assessments and lawsuit. That's the 2 main ones that you need to do. Because you don't want to go in there and then 2 months later find out that they did a $10,000 assessment. That's your buyer doesn't want to know that. And then usually it doesn't happen overnight. This is something that if you read in their minutes, they already were talking about it in the last 6 months. So it's not something that one day they woke up and say, oh, we're gonna have the $500 HOA assessment. So it's not overnight.
And it's not just for condos. It's like
Any-
how any
No,
homes
only,
have HOAs too, a lot of times.
if they're part of the HOA.
Yeah.
If they are part of, all right, moving on. Next one is number 7, seller shall pay for any private transfer fee. Transfer fee falls under a lot of different things, but sometimes it could be if it's for example, one could be a co-op. They might have a private transfer fee. There are different transfer fees you come across, but one of them would be a co-op. And then all what I do, I check mark 7. I say if applicable. That's all you have to put in there. And you check mark the 7 and if it's applicable. Next one is the other thing that you can include here, seller shall pay, and that's an iffy one. Section 1. Section 1 of work of termite. So when they do a termite report, they tell you, listen, these are the things that needs to be done. So if before you ask for the report, now you're asking the seller to pay for the fumigation and all that. So that's what. And there's 2 sections, section 1, section 2. Section 1 are what's obvious. Section 2, things that are not obvious. Termite company. Listen, if I open that wall, there might be termite in there. So it tells you. I don't go by your dream or by your guess. Show me something evidence. You can open the wall. If not, not happen. Make sense? So next one is seller shall pay for the cost of home warranty for 1 year home warranty, not to exceed. Again, you see, this is the term, not to exceed. So sometimes you see like there's a brochure outside for home warranty. So a condo about $400, house about $800, depending how big it is. A lot of, so get yourself familiar. For this house, probably I would put $1,000, and then for here I would use, what should I put? Tires, trucks. And then guess what? That's not the only place I can do. As far as the option, you have up to $1,000. So what I do, I just put other. Guess what? Tires choice. So does he want full coverage? Don't have it. So whatever he wants. Now this is my choice. So the seller cannot say, "Oh, you just said air. Oh, you just said pool." I put other. Choice. Make sense? Now, if the buyer decides not to go with that, I'm not gonna click here, but you know, this is if the buyer waives to purchase a home warranty, and you click on that. And then what I do when I'm sending it for electronic signature, I have an initial on the side again. Next, item included or excluded. So it used to be we write them in every time. Now you just press all stoves, all refrigerators, and all washer and dryers, because that's the most common items that it gets requested. Before we had to handwrite. And why does it say all? Because sometimes there's a refrigerator in the kitchen and one in the garage. And guess what? Again, I do have a story for every instance. Sold a house, the seller took the old refrigerator in the garage and put the kitchen into the new one. Guess what? I made the agent pay for a brand new refrigerator for my client. Because that's how the contract said. For agent, $1,800 for a fridge. Because the seller would not pay it. And that was his responsibility to make the seller understand. Additional items, you know what? There's a fireplace screen, those tools on the side, you can ask for those.
Tesla chargers,
Huh?
Tesla chargers.
Tesla chargers. You know, Tesla chargers are mounted, so you know the seller should exclude it. So things that they're mounted,
Well,
screwed onto the wall.
In one of my offers, I see it and I edit.
Huh?
In one of my offers, I see it and I edit in.
But that was your problem. You should have done as it.
No, I told you.
Oh, okay. And you know why? Because if you don't say anything and they decide
It's
to
a
take
private
it,
property.
then they did something illegal. But when you put it in there, you remind them, hey, the Tesla charger gonna be there. And then they're gonna say, you remind me, no, we're taking it. That charger is $500. We're taking it with us. So if you don't put it in there and they decide to answer and take it with them, they can't. Then they owe you for that.
If I don't put it,
Yeah. And the
why
seller
is
decides, they
the
should have excluded it.
fixture?
It's a fifty, yeah. It's anything, the moment they screw it in, you know what? Refrigerator.
As far as I know, anything that can be like
Let me explain.
can taken.
Don't waste that. Let me explain. Because we're running out of time. Refrigerator, Sub-Zero, custom made. The door is custom made to match the cabinets. And most Sub-Zeros, they don't even have a wheel under. It stays there. No wheel under. Sub-Zero stays. Regular refrigerator that has a wheel, you can wheel it out. That's not a fixture. The moment anything becomes custom, drapes stay. They cannot take it. It was built custom, it was mounted on. If the seller wants to take it, they have to exclude. Chandeliers, it was hardwired in, stays. Seller has to exclude it. If they don't exclude it,
Sheds.
that they cannot. Same shape. All of these are mounted. You cannot take it anymore. Go back to your real estate plans.
Security cameras, fixture.
All those are mounted. If as a listing agent, now you flip it on the other side. All of those you have to go over to the seller. Because the seller can come back and hunt you, go after you for that. Hey, listing agent, you never told me.
How you, as a buyer agent, how you prove that they are dead or not?
Huh?
How you prove if they were dead or not?
That's the charge.
For example, you said that unless you mention it, they have to
If
put it there.
You know what? First of all, when you do inspection report, there's a good chance that they take a picture of it. And then also on the website, there's a picture of the house. So in the kitchen, you can see all the appliances. That's why.
No, I'm talking about the other, like, I don't know, sheds, Tesla chargers or whatever.
All of those, you know what? I don't think it's that hard to prove that the Tesla charger was there. Make sense? So everything that's screwed on stays. Yeah. That's why, as a listing agent, you have to make sure you go over this and you remind them. When you get in the listing, walk the place. Let's say you went for a listing appointment. So when you're done, walk the place. Go room by room. Are you living the wash and dry? The refrigerator. And then right now, even if you look at a new listing contract, some of those are in. It tells you, is your alarm leased or do you own? So that's the other thing you have to watch out when you're getting a listing. All right. Here, lease or lien items. There's a conversation about that. Item excluded from the sale. What's a good thing to exclude? Let's say you walk in, and this is again from experience. You go in there and you have a seller that is a horror, that he kept every single thing. You go in the backyard, there's like 10 tires, 3 broken lawnmowers, and you have all that junk in the backyard in the garage. Guess what? Seller to remove all those items from the garage or yard. Otherwise, again, there's a story for that too. You go in after closing, and then you have to order a bin and order some day laborers to come and remove all that. That thing might cost you $1,000. So the seller leaves all that behind and goes, they're coming, you generally don't take it to court. But if you write it in there, then you have a better chance in court. Make sense?
Yeah.
All right. TVs. Bracket stays, TVs goes. So you remember how we said how things are screwed to the wall? So they outline that. Bracket stays and TV goes. So let the seller know, hey, don't take away the brackets. If you want the bracket to, if the seller wants to take it, within the counter offer. Seller will remove bracket and patch the wall. That's your other option.
They take the paint with them if they could.
Huh?
They take the paint with them if they could.
All right, closing possession. So sometimes, you know what, 6 p.m. The reason there's a default 6 p.m. because on the day of the thing, usually by 5 o'clock, counter reporter is closed. Let's say it takes some time for the title company to contact you and all that. By 6 p.m. usually you should know if the property was recorded or not. So that's the thing when it goes to number 9. So when it comes to possession, you have, there could be some negotiation that was done before, and you want to make it easy, and you say, okay, no later than X amount of days after close. So let's say if you already had a conversation with the listing agent and say, hey, listen, the buyer will not be moving out, the seller will not be moving out the 3 days after closing. So that's when you're gonna put in like 3 days. Now, with that said, when you go back to the MLS, sometimes the listing agent already indicated that the seller wants to stay 2 or 3 days after close. So if you go back and look at the MLS, you can find that. Usually after possession, depending on what MLS you are with, but you usually have it. I'm not gonna take your time right now, but usually it says +2, +1, and you usually see that. If the seller has requested to stay beyond. Why elderly people, they want to make sure that it closes before they do the final move out. So there could be different reasons that the seller might want to stay a day or 2. If that happens, you don't want to take any liability, and probably you want to have the buyer sign some documents so you are not, they don't come after you.
What happens, this has happened to you, buy a property and they don't ask for extra days, but they stay there. What's the course of action for that?
It's illegal, they stay there illegally.
Yes.
You sheriff department comes and takes them out. Right now, it's an illegal, what you call it, it's an illegal squatter. Well, there's a term for it, but illegally they are staying there. Sheriff can come and take them.
So that could take months now to keep them out.
Because of COVID? No, because they're not a tenant.
No, but COVID, you can't kick someone out.
No,
As a
I mean,
tenant.
They're not paid.
as a
Only
tenant.
as
So you know what, first of all, as a realtor, don't even go there for many reasons. So if ever anybody tells you, go seek an attorney thing,
Yeah.
and then there's a lot of bylaws. Again, I would tell you go see an attorney, but I just want to say of the conversation, you know what? Then that's why if the seller doesn't stay there, if he stays there less than 30 days, he's a seller. If he stays there more than 30 days, then he becomes a tenant, and all the tenant laws apply. So when the seller wants to do a rent back, you have to make that decision. Also, guess what? There's a form for that. SIP, seller in possession, and RLS is when the seller decides to stay there more than 30 days. And then they're gonna get there. So the next thing is seller in possession. That would be the form SIP. Car form SIP, seller in possession. But if it's less than 30 days, or car form RLS, for sellers continuing occupying for more than 30 days. So, and then that form outlines if there's gonna be a rent, a fee, the deposit, and all that, and that form has to be incorporated. And this is the same, even if you're not gonna charge, and then what I indicated there, I take a deposit if they decide to stay beyond that. So in case they do decide to stay more than a week, I have some money to dangle. Also, I would indicate in there that if they stay beyond 30 days, they need to write up another contract. So there's no different ways that you can. There are either, when it comes to it, if you talk to me, I will tell you what would be the ideal ways to put in there to protect yourself. Now there could be a tenant possession, and again, that's a different form, so consider that. If there are tenant, you have an ADU and tenant gonna stay, make sure that you do your due diligence. Since you guys are not familiar with commercial or income properties and all that, it's good to know that if there is an ADU, who owns the appliances and stuff like that. That's why looking at the lease and having a copy of the lease is better, because a lot of that in the commercial side, usually ask for estoppel. Estoppel is basically an outline of what's going on with the tenants, how much deposit they had, what was their rent, and what appliances they want to take. This way, when they want to move out, and they say, hey, I have $3,000 deposit, and you say, seller never transferred $3,000 to me. So that's why sometimes getting those leases, it lets you know how much of the deposit the owner has collected, and then in escrow, they have to transfer that deposit to you. Make sense?
Yeah.
Now, if there's a condominium, it indicates, you want to make sure that the seller is doing whatever they can. So seller has 7 days to, do their due diligence on them or whatever they need to do. After acceptance disclosure, buyer, if property is condominium, look at trust, car form, SPQ or ESD, as I told you. The replacement if it's a thing. Next, if the property is a condominium, it's located in a planned development or other common interest, seller has 3 days after acceptance to request a HOA. So within 3 days after acceptance, seller has to start getting the paperwork or they cover the CCNR and ask for the HOA to all those disclosures. Again, there's a lot of things, it's a good thing for you guys to read. I'm not going to go over it. 14, that's your third contingency. So if you did the appraisal contingency, if you did the loan contingency, this is your due diligence contingency under 14B. Basically, 14B tells that's where the buyer gets to do his, do inspection, review all the different disclosures that it's provided by the seller. Now, one other item that most people they oversee is access to the property. Buyer shall have access to the property to conduct inspection and investigation for 17 days after acceptance. Most listing agent, they forget to counter when you have like a 10-day contingency and it's over, and then the buyer wants to bring their uncle, aunts, the whole family to revisit. So they continue to come and revisit the property after we remove the contingency. So it says, what the hell? You cannot camp out here every day, bring a new family member to check out the place, especially I'm a Middle Eastern, so especially with my own family, we get to bring all the family members in. So with that in mind, it's a good idea if you're a listing agent to put that to the same time of the due diligence. So if you're limiting that to 10 days, if the seller is countering you and he's saying that your due diligence time is 10 days, make sure that you counter that to be 10 days too. So they don't keep on bringing their family member. As a listing agent, why you don't want the buyer to keep on bringing family member in there? There's always this family member so negative, brings out all the negative things that it makes the buyer change their mind. So that is a smart idea to have them come and keep on coming in. C, remove of contingency without with the offer. Let's say the buyer says, listen, I love the property, I don't want to do any inspection, I'm buying it all cash. So that's why if the buyer gonna remove all contingencies, they put this in bold. Hey, remove contingency without offer, buyer removes the contingency, specifically the attached contingency removal, there's a form for that. If buyer removes any of it without an adequate understanding of the property conditions, purchase buyer is acting against the advice of the broker. So it helps us in protecting us, saying, hey, buyer, we recommend for you not to do it, but if you're doing it, you're on your own. Notice to buyer to perform. Usually it's standard 2 days. Sometimes agents reduce it to 1 day. Basically, if you give them a contingency, 17-day contingency, and then let's say in California, they have to remove their contingency active, not passive. Automatically, it doesn't expire. They have to submit on paper on the CR, on the contingency removal form, that they are, sorry if I have my back to you guys. They have it physically on a paper in writing, say that they are removing one contingency. So one thing for you to know, if there is a contingency, it's not one of those like 17 days comes by and goes, and automatically that was removed. So if you're new and you're the listing agent and say you gave the buyer 17-day contingency, on the 16th day or the 15th day, start communicating. Say, listen, selling agent, your buyer has to remove contingency. On the 16th day, you can already give them notice to perform. So 24 hours before the due date, you can give the buyer notice to perform. Make sense? So just to let you know, say, listen, I'm not joking with you. I'm asking you to remove contingency. And if they fail to give you that form, you can cancel. It gives you the seller option of canceling and returning the deposit. It was funny that I went against an attorney and I won. My client went in there and says, give him a notice to perform. And I told the client, listen, if you give him a notice to perform, the seller can cancel and they have to, and the buyer can, if you serve the buyer notice to perform for something that they already removed their contingency, let's say they're not closing, they remove our contingency, but they are not closing. And you give them a notice to perform. And notice to perform states that you either perform or you cancel. Now, I told the client, say, listen, don't give them a notice to perform because then the buyer can cancel and get their deposit back. And they said, no, if go ahead and do that, they cannot do that. I said, where on the contract it says that? On the notice to perform paper, it doesn't say that. I said, well, there it doesn't say, but it makes you refer you to the contract. And if you go and read the contract, it tells you when you serve the notice to perform, I can cancel. So the attorney learned a lesson there. He has to read the purchase contract.
How do you get out without losing the deposit?
Don't remove your contingencies. The moment you remove your contingencies, and your best luck is the agent on the other side doesn't know what he's doing, and you're not closing, and he gives you a notice to perform. That's the best that can happen. Because then you can cancel and get your deposit.
Not the same from the other side, on the selling, being a listing agent side.
Oh,
You
there's
want
a
to
form
be-
for that.
That's okay.
Yeah, that's called demand to process. Easy. The form, that's the right form to give. You give that to the buyer, say demand to process for, and if you have to process for, then you can have this. So using the right form is the proper one. And unfortunately, that's one of my arguments with a lot of buyers. A lot of times they go to a PI, personal injury attorney and tell them to get advice. And those are a nightmare because I always get into arguments with one of those attorneys because they have no idea about the real estate law. So if your client ever has a real estate issue, make sure that there's, and ask him specifically if the attorney that they're seeking, if they're real estate attorneys or not. If they're not, strongly advise them, please, if you can, go see a real estate attorney. My experience has been time after time that attorneys that are not real estate, they screw things up. It just, they don't have enough knowledge. And with attorneys, and that's what happens in a lot of communities, they see a attorney and they think that he can do everything. And unfortunately, that's not the case. Again, as much as I had a deal that the seller was a entity, even when I'm representing the buyer and I'm submitting an offer, as soon as I open escrow, if the listing agent does not give me the RCSD, and I see that the seller is a corporation, I demand from day one to get. Okay, number 20. A copy of agreement including any of counter offers, and them shall be delivered to escrow holder within 3 days after acceptance. And regarding to the contract for you guys, when does this clock start ticking?
Should they second the offer?
You received the sign.
Signature and acknowledgement. So depending what kind of a contract you have, if it was multiple offer or regular one, whoever was the last to sign and the other party acknowledged. So let's say it was a situation, the buyer sent the buyer counter offer, the seller signed, right? Last time, but the listing agent did not give it to you until the next morning. So what happens? The next day, that's the acceptance. And then unfortunately, this is one thing that happens all the time. Escrow doesn't know that. Escrow looks at that day and then says, oh, it was accepted on the day that the seller signed. And then you have to go to the escrow company and say, no, yeah, seller signed yesterday, but actually the listing agent just sent it to me today. So you can go back to the escrow company and say, hey, I never was in receipt of that. I never acknowledged, or there's no proof that I received it. If the listing agent can show me an email that he sent me, great. Otherwise, he never sent me. That happens a lot of times. So the clock actually takes from the time that in reality the other party received. So there's 2 ways to look at it. From the clock starts from the last party side, and also not only that, it could happen that seller signed, but the listing agent never let the other party know. How would they know if they haven't? And then not only that, only accept something in writing. Again, that has happened. We had a verbal agreement. Yes, seller signed. We're right. 2 days passed by. Hey, listing agent, where is it? No, you know what, seller, they want to sign. We are in this situation. Hey, you promised. The agent can say whatever. We had no case. So then the seller kind of raised the price another $5,000. My buyer was desperate. Actually, not my mentee buyer was desperate enough. So if the agent say, hey, your offer was exciting, hey, but I don't see it in my email. Can you have this sign? Share that with me. Make sure you have it in writing. All right, next. You guys remember when I told you about liquidated damages? All right, that's a separately liquidated damages. That's the maximum 3%. Shall be no more than 3% of the purchase price. So let's say all of a sudden, you guys cancel and the market, it was a 6 months escrow, and you remove your contingency, and all of a sudden the market changed, and all of a sudden the price of the house dropped $300,000, and the seller says, hey, because you're not finishing, if you would have not gone into this transaction 6 months ago, I could have sold it for $300,000 more. Because of you, I'm losing $300,000, not 3%. So legal damage is 3%. Maximum that the seller can hold you liable is 2%. Make sense? Okay, there's a section here, arbitration between you and the client. Arbitration clause. So what are you gonna tell them about this one here? Practically nothing, because it's about you. You cannot give advice to the client. Buyer, why don't you don't sue me, and let's not do any long thing, just do arbitration. Since it involves you, you cannot give any advice regarding to arbitration. So how do I explain that to them? I said, listen, if my brother was writing this offer and going against one of these major real estate companies, which they have deep pockets and they can run you around for many months, so they drain your bank with attorney fees and postponing it and making you spend money, I would have recommended to my own brother to take the arbitration or the mediation, because that's going to happen fast, and that would be my 2 cents. But I always say, hey, you need to consult with your attorney. But if they insist, hey, Joe, what do you think? What would you really do? Listen, if it was my own brother, I would have signed. Like, you have to consult with your attorney. Make sense? Don't make him sign. And then even when you do this on the electronic signature, that part comes as an option. Every other signature comes mandatory for them to initial or sign. Those two comes optional. The arbitration and then the legal damages, when you send them for signature, and it says the computer automatically populates those initials, those two are become as optional. Okay. Please read the time of the essence definition and all that. I'm gonna just take it really one. A day with a capital D or a small d has 2 different meanings. Right? One ends at 5 o'clock, one ends at midnight. So just writing a day with a lowercase or uppercase makes a difference. So please read all the terms so you understand. Make sense? All right. Expiration of the offer. When you write an offer, by default, it's 3 days. Let's say you're writing an offer on Friday, and you don't want the listing agent to have an open house and get another offer. So your expiration is going to be for that Sunday morning. Hey, seller to give us an answer before 12 p.m. before the open house, so they don't get so. You might have certain game plan, or you specifically giving the seller a timeline to give it. All right. So that's why you would say, hey, you need to do it by that time, or by that hour, by that day. Make sense? Buyer gonna sign. Since the buyer putting a signature here, they don't have an initial, but still the seller has to initial. Make sense? Last page. This is the, you submit the offer. Now the seller has the offer in his hand. They reviewed it. So there's 2 options. Either he signs the offer and dates it and said, let's go for it. Or he says, well, I like everything about the offer with the exception of the things that I'm gonna put in the counter offer. So counter offer, you countering the terms that you don't like. So don't start putting things, when you want even in a back and forth counter offer, only counter the terms that you don't agree on. So don't repeat the same thing. You don't have to repeat. You only counter the items that you disagree. So if you didn't like 17-day contingency, you just say it's going to be a 10-day contingency. Just counter the items that you don't agree with. Again, if there is a, if it's a corporation, make sure that that gets check marked and quickly there was one form populated. This is the section that you sign. Yeah, you get to sign on the last page. Both the listing agent and selling agent, they get to sign here. And then this is the part that company gonna ask you for escrow acknowledgement. So at one point, escrow would stamp here or fill this out and send that page only back to you as acknowledgement on page 10. So if you ever see page 10 or acknowledged from escrow, that's what they're talking about. Now, let's say the seller wants to reject the offer. Make sure you have the seller initial the rejection. Why? One of those buyers that was rejected, gets be friends with the seller, says, hey, I sent an offer. Why you never responded to my offer? It says, I don't even remember seeing that offer. So they go back to the listing agent. Hey, why you didn't represent that offer? And you say, hey, I did. He said, I never seen it. Oh, don't you remember? You put it in initial. That's why you need, if there is an offer that not be rejected, have the seller initial. And also presentation of the offer. So you want to make sure you get those initial that was presented. This is one next page. So we are done with the 10th page of the purchase contract. The buyer inspection advisory is basically telling the buyer, listen, you can do law of inspections and make sure you check out the neighborhood, security and safety, just some stuff for the buyer to watch out for, and they sign it. Last page that came out 2 years ago, Privacy Act, and that's the last page. Quickly, I'm gonna go over representation capacity. You remember how I told you their corporation? So, name of the corporation, is it a trust entity? If it's an entity, is it a corporation limited? You check mark that. They're going to be the name of the individual, not the corporation. So, you know what? If this is ABC Incorporated, it's mine. Joe Solamany is going to go here, and my title is either the operating manager, I'm the president, I'm the treasurer, whatever position I have with that LLC or corporation goes there. Most people title, it's not Mr. or Mrs. or it's not one of the, not the name of the corporation, not any of that. So specify what's your position with that entity. Okay, so here they're gonna sign, seller gonna sign here, and this is for the seller. Seller gonna sign here, he's gonna put his actual name and sign it date. If there's more than one person, they both sign it. Or if it's a trust, they both sign it. At time of the listing, seller and seller broker, Keller Williams, not your name, and the registered broker, and if I go there, probably gonna pop up. Okay, and seller and the buyer, who was Joe Smith was the buyer, and Joe Smith gonna sign that and go from there. So this is the affidavit of the seller saying, hey, I have every right to sign on behalf of the corporation. Make sense? Sorry, it took a while. Any questions?
1,000, just kidding.
No,
A lot of scenarios.
I tried to
you
be
can't cover
detailed
it.
as possible.
I have to
Thank
do
you
my
so
call.
much.
Yeah.
That's why. All right, guys, good luck.
Thank you so much, really
Yeah.
appreciate it.
Okay.
Thank you. I made a business card to send you the form. I want to show it to you guys think it's good.
5 things, your picture, your name, yourself.
You already know.
License number?
Realtor, trademark.
And what I care
It
for,
looks bad.
your picture, your name, your phone number, your email address, or your PR number. 5 things that I want to see that. Anything else, those are what, the
This
office.
yeah, this is good.
Oh, I mean, the
I got rid of real estate. I think I should get rid of real estate.
No.
Should I get rid of this specialization of residential?
Get rid of that.
We have blank.
Yeah, well,
It's gonna look weird, but
that's fine. You can make your picture bigger. Yeah. A longer office.
but I'm not that self-absorbed. I wanna make it the whole thing.
So, what? Change a lot.
Yeah, I'll move this. I
No,
can
no,
move
no,
it.
no, no, no. Color wheel on left side.
However, we'll move it, I can put it here.
Yeah.
And then have this down, make it bigger.
Exactly. You want to emphasize on your name, you don't want to emphasize on color wheel.
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
sign yourself.
actually, that was a mistake, yeah. This should be bigger. Yeah.
Your name should be big.
Bigger, yeah.
No.
Thank you.
Alright, guys. How you doing?
Good, I have a little issue with some of the properties that I have my buyer. I'll probably do it by-
Is everything? Talk to me right away. If not, call me. I don't see no, you can hear, oh. Joe.
Well, right now, I'm having issues getting hold of the buyer, but basically, I think that we should get a conflict in this property. The limiting you can't secure it for us to view it.
What?
You can't secure an appointment for us to view it.
Okay.
And then, I think the tenants are probably not paying rent, because she's walking around, so like, well, you need the paperwork to show what the rents are and all the other stuff, she's like, kind of screwing them out.
How many is this?
Only two,
The duplex was on the upside.
yeah.
So, yeah, she should not have any issues. You should, you can write it on the thing. As for stuff, right over and all that, and you can do it after acceptance.
Yeah, but I'm just like,
Thanks, Joe.
she's not the most professional, so it's making it hard to, you
You know,
know,
but unfortunately, this is getting all the time.
I know.
But if you want to make it large, if you like the property, so, it's fine. If he likes the property, let me know.
Yeah, so I'm trying to get one or two, because, you know, the military is going through some stuff right now, so. Yeah.
Let's keep it posted.
Yeah. I was hoping I could get most of it done before I go on vacation, because you know that.
As new agents, a lot of this is overwhelming, and it may not make it quick, it not make sense, but then as you get more and more into it.
Yeah.
You're gonna have a flashback.
No, it was helpful, really.
You don't have that.
Yeah, like.
Yeah, I know, I was doing it. Unfortunately. So my meeting about an hour, I called you.
Even the investments, like, just like standard, like, you know, you just get bottom down this, or that, or what's the risk? Okay, you know, it's like, and everybody gets that. No matter where you go, you have like this. Yeah. Yeah, just making sure that you get it like off, so you don't have to go back and forth, right? I spec home, you get this, or you get that.
How long have you been around?
That's not true, right? Looks like that? That's not right. No. Yeah, it looks very good. Oh, you're talking about, what? It was on a port at that time, right? Or- Waves. I'm part. Yeah. What's the time today? Yes. How about writing? I don't know. You know it. That's just my advice. Next thing I believe it depends on its location. Good. I will afford it brand new, so I got it. Right, so. Did you guys have one? Another. So it's interesting. You asked the question. That's what I was thinking too. So we can bring it over in America. What I was, like, studies posted. It's absolutely fine. But no, I would assume somebody who wants to buy it as can rent for whatever they want. There's no sense to it all. Because now construction here is a little bigger and they get most communities. So there's a little square footage and it's usually more something like it. And it kind of outlasts. So so much more house that is over the value of the got it. Kind of the same. Over the house. Yeah, that's. One of the systems is what you have a factor. What it is, like. Right. But yeah. It's nice. Most different ways. It makes more sense there to get more. We have a project now. It's not happening house. It's R2, so we go to CPU. So it's speeds. I'm telling you guys, this is the compass very fast. But this is La Brea and Eagle. Very hot. Not La Brea, for a little further up. Just so just south. Yeah, it's getting very hot. Very hot. You know why? You know why? What is this? Sprouts that just opened up. What is the property? Why? That's the next all the new generation. use kind of words, that's fine. People, schools are open. It's Western culture has become very popular now. That it's like, this is like random people. Yeah, that's what I thought. It's getting crazy. It's a million change house now. It's not. That's not what. Everything's moving down there. I'm saying that out by those buses. Good. I'm just thinking about this. Yeah.
You know, at least like, with the best of the songs, I'll be like, birthday. Good. And it was like, it's not robotic, like, take a picture and see what happens. You know, like, no one has just one more.
I see you around the last. Yeah, I don't know where. Not really, I have some all the time.
Here.
This is other class, I'm trying to reach out to them.
good amount here for your.
Oh, cool, for your class. The bees are in the house.
Representing all classes.
Yes.
Hello,
How are you?
good, how are you?
Came to represent. Oh, what is that over here? What's going on over here? Why is it still recording?